Like I promised in the previous video, in this video, we'll be looking at group classification, still talking about finite group theorem. And, previously we had considered silo theorem. And before that, we saw uh, divisibility in group theory, results of divisibility in group theory. So here we are again talking about group classification. So here we are going to basically see how groups are classified. So talking about group classification, the learning goals are as follows. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to classify all groups of order PQ. I mean, before in the last video, we already began to, get glimpses of order PQ and all that, where P is less than Q are primes, and we classify all groups of order P squared, and we understand what simple groups are and why they matter, and understand solvable groups and their role in algebra. So, why do we bother about group classification? That's the first big thing we want to consider. Why group classification in the first place? Why do we classify groups? So again, of course, when we talk about group in this context, we are talking about a set. A group is made up of a set and a binary operation, and there will be certain rules like closure and all of that. So why group classification, right? Group theory asks a fundamental question. Given a positive integer n, what are all the groups of order n? Basically, that's what group theory answers. So if you have a positive integer, what are all the groups of order n that we can ever have? So classification then means listing all possible group structures of a given order, all right, determining when groups must be abelian, identifying when non-abelian groups exist, understanding how subgroups and normality restrict structure. So we already saw the idea of subgroups and normality since we started considering finite group theory. We saw normality and conjugacy when we talked about silo 2, because we saw silo 1 theorem. The first silo theorem talks about existence, of subgroups. Silo 2 talks about conjugacy, while silo 3 talks about counting. So in this case, this lesson focuses on small orders and structural properties that scale to deeper theory. So let's start by looking at groups of order PQ, like which we already began to see in the last video. So let P and Q be distinct primes with P less than Q. Of course, we talked about the idea of writing, is it a fundamental theorem, fundamental number theory or so, that you can write every number as a product of prime factors. Okay. So, and of course, as usual, we start with the smallest prime number like 2 and we move to 3 and keep going in that order. So that's why P is less than Q. So let the order of group G be PQ. We know that P is less than Q, maybe 2 times 3, for instance, that's 6 and so on. Then the key tools here, we need Cauchy's theorem, silo theorems, and normal subgroup arguments. Don't forget, Cauchy's theorem is the most fundamental form of silo theorems, like we saw in the previous video. Now, let's go ahead and talk about silo subgroups now. Silo subgroups. So for silo subgroups, let G be a group of order PQ with P less than Q. Then we now say let NQ be the number of silo Q groups. In the last video, we called it silo P groups. Anything you want to call it. So it's basically still the same thing. So let NQ be the number of silo Q groups. Then we say NQ is similar, is congruent to 1 modulo Q. We saw that a lot, like 1 modulo P the other time. And then we also say that NQ, right, divides P. So whatever you pick. So this NQ will have to divide P. So if you pick Q, then it divides P. If you pick P, it divides Q. And then in that case, NP will be congruent to 1 modulo P. So depending on what you pick. So since P is less than Q, the only divisor of P congruent to 1 mod Q will simply be NQ, which is equal to 1, right? So because P is less than Q, therefore the silo Q subgroup is normal. So once NQ is 1, then the silo Q subgroup will be normal in that case. Now, what are the consequences of this idea we just talked about? So let Q be the unique silo Q subgroup because, of course, NQ is 1 now, right? So let Q be the unique silo Q group. So, of course, the idea of normality is that the left coset is equal to the right coset. So we see all of this coming together now. Okay, so because if they are the same, so let's keep it the unique silo Q subgroup and let P be a silo P subgroup. Then we say that Q, which is the silo Q subgroup, is a normal subgroup of G in that case. All right, then the order of Q will be equal to a particular value q, and the order of p will be p. Hence, we can say that G is isomorphic to Q. I don't know how to okay, this structure depends on whether the action of P on Q is trivial. So Q, this sign, I'm not sure what it is called, but that's that. We just know Q is isomorphic to Q by P. But this, I don't think this is just by, like, this one has some special thing. So this structure now depends on whether the action of P on Q is trivial. So let's talk about classification theorem for order PQ, since we are still talking about order PQ. So let P be less than Q be primes, like we know. If P does not divide Q minus 1, that means that P is not a factor of Q minus 1. Q minus 1 is not divisible by P, right? Then we say that Q is isomorphic to ZPQ, which is cyclic and abelian. So on the other hand, if P divides Q minus 1, then we have the following. There exists a non-abelian group of order PQ. So if P divides Q minus 1, then there's a non-abelian group of order PQ, and exactly two groups up to isomorphism. So, and those two groups are ZPQ and a non-abelian semi-direct product. So if P does not divide Q minus 1, then we have a cyclic and abelian, an abelian group, subgroup rather, or group which is isomorphic to ZPQ. Okay, so a very simple example to look at. Imagine that if you have groups of order 6, say the order of a particular group G is 6, which is 2 times 3. Here now P is 2, Q is 3. And then you see here that 2 divides 3 minus 1. And when 2 divides 3 minus 1 like that, what happens? Therefore, there are two groups, just like we saw there, ZPQ and a non-abelian direct semi-product. So there are two groups. The two groups will be Z sub 2 times 3, that's Z6, which is abelian. So, and Z6 is a set of all integers from 0 to 7, so which would be abelian in that case, meaning that any two elements you pick from Z6, if you add them together, you get a result inside the group. In fact, if you multiply, you may even get the same thing in whatever order you pick. Then another group you might get, so this is a non-abelian semi-direct product. So, and that can be S3 now, which is non-abelian. So that's a symmetry group 3, which is, we know generally that symmetry group 3 is generally non-abelian, right? Based on all the things we've considered before. So we can say, hence, all groups of order 6 are classified. So it's either abelian or non-abelian. So then we go for, so we are done with groups of order PQ. Now we go for groups of order P squared. Okay, so instead of P and Q, you just have just P multiplied by P. So talking about groups of order P squared now, okay, so let P be a prime and the order of G is equal to P squared. The order of G is P squared. So the key idea is you have groups of prime power order have, so key idea, groups of prime power order have non-trivial centers. So prime power order have non-trivial centers. So let's talk about the center argument here now. So we've seen the idea of center, especially when we're talking about what was that we're talking about? We're talking about power tools for group actions. So for center argument, let Z of G be the center of G, the center of the group. Then we say that the order of the center is not equal to 1. So, and then the possible orders can then be P or P squared. So for case 1 now, if the center of G is P squared, then we say G is abelian. But if the center, for case 2, if the center, the order of the center here is P squared, then it's abelian. If the, for case 2, the order of the center of G is P, then we can say G divides Z of G. So G divides the center of G, has order P and is cyclic. Thus, we also say that in that case, G is abelian. Okay, so how do we classify, how do we then classify classification theorem for order P squared? So the theorem simply states that every group of order P squared is abelian. So every group of order P squared is abelian. Up to isomorphism, there are exactly two possibilities. We have Z sub P squared and we have ZP by ZP. So these are the possibilities we have in this case. So let's look at some sweet examples. So groups of order 9 for instance, let the order of G be 9, which is 3 squared. So the possible subgroups here will just be Z. So we have the set of all integers from 0 to 8, and then we have Z3 by Z3. That's the set of all integers from 0 to 2, multiplying themselves. So it comes up like some kind of Cartesian product. So in this case, now we have no non-abelian groups of order 9 exist. No non-abelian groups of order 9 exist. So all groups of order 9 are actually abelian. That's what this is about. So if this is confusing, just cancel the no and let the no cancel the none, and then you have abelian groups of order 9. Only abelian groups of order 9 exist. That's another way of saying this, right? So let's go ahead and talk about simple groups. So we've seen groups of order PQ, we've seen groups of order P squared. Now we're talking about simple groups. So a group G is called simple if G is not equal to the identity element, and then G has no non-trivial normal subgroups. That is, the only normal subgroups are the identity element and G itself. That's when you have a simple group. So a group is said to be simple if it has only only two normal subgroups. That's the identity and itself, basically. So it's a technical way of it is normal groups. I mean, simple groups are uh what prime numbers are to numbers, right? Something like that. Just like for a number can only be divided by itself and 1. So a simple group only has subgroups that is a set of the identity or the group itself. So let's look at some examples. Cyclic groups of prime order like ZP is simple, right? So it means it only has the identity and itself. Then alternating groups like AN is simple for all n greater than or equal to 5. So but for 4 downwards, it doesn't work. Then finite simple groups fall into families. So those families can then be cyclic groups of prime order, alternating groups, groups of Lie type, and 26 sporadic groups like that. So the question is, why do simple groups matter? Why do simple groups matter? So, simple groups play the role of building blocks of group theory, right? So, they're the building blocks of group theory. So, just as prime numbers build integers, simple groups build all finite groups. Exactly what I was trying to explain before, that, simple groups are to groups what prime numbers are to numbers. So, just as prime numbers build integers, then simple groups build all finite groups. So every finite group can be decomposed using normal subgroups whose factors are simple, just like every number can be expressed as a product of prime factors like that. So then we have another type of group. So we've talked about P squared, group of order PQ, groups of order P squared. Now we've talked about simple groups, and now we're talking about solvable groups. A group G is solvable, all right? A group G is solvable if there exists a chain of subgroups. So if you can have a chain of subgroups from a group, then you can say it is solvable. So imagine the identity being equal to G naught, which is a normal subgroup of G1. G1 is a normal subgroup of G2, and so on, all the way to Gn minus 1 being a normal subgroup of Gn, and all of that is also equal to G. So the identity is equal to G, sort of. So such that the quotient Gi plus 1 over Gi is abelian. So that's when you say a group is solvable. So equivalent characterization, you can say a group is solvable if its derived series G of 0 is GG1, which is equal to G2, G1, and all that. Eventually, it reaches the identity, the set of just a singleton set of the identity. So we have examples for this also. All abelian groups are solvable. Then all P groups are also solvable. S3 is solvable. Sn is not solvable for n greater than or equal to 5, like that. So then we have the historic significance of this whole idea. So we see Galois being thrown up here in when we talk about the history of solvable groups. So solvable groups arise naturally in Galois theory, and then uh, a polynomial equation is solvable by radicals if and only if its Galois group is solvable. Then this connects group theory to classical algebra. So in summary, we see that groups of order PQ are classified using silo theory, and then groups of order P squared are always abelian. Simple groups have no non-trivial normal subgroups, and then solvable groups admits a chain with abelian quotients. Then small group classifications motivate deep structural theory. And then that leads us to our 10 questions as usual. Let me see if I can fit everything into one frame. If not, I'll take them in fives. Can we do this? I guess we can. We barely can. Okay, so let me do it in fives, which is even bolder. Okay, let's do it in fives like this. Okay, so practice questions now. Let G be a group of order 15. Determine the number of Silent subgroups of each prime order. Of course, you have to do the whole 3 times 5 to prove that G is cyclic, blah, blah, blah. And you can do all of that. So, yeah, question 5. List all groups of order 9 up to isomorphism. For each group, determine the order of every element. You can do that based on the things you've been doing. So, for question 6, let G be a group of order PQ, where P is less than Q are primes. Prove that if P does not divide Q minus 1, then G is cyclic. We did something like that in the notes. Then question to ensure that every abelian group is solvable. Construct an explicit normal series that demonstrates this property, right? Okay, so we have all of that. And with this, we come to the end of this very interesting video about group classification. So see the necessity of classifying groups and all of that based on their order and some other property. So let me know how helpful this is for you. And if there's something else you'd like me to try out, feel very free to let me know. Don't forget to try your hands on these questions, especially following the things I've done in the notes before now. All right. So if you have subscribed already, I thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed, I wonder why you have not. Why not just go ahead right now and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can always get alerted each time a new video is released. Having done that, you can also join. You want to become a member of this channel, you can join. That comes with some special privileges, including things like some videos only for members, or some videos seen by members before other people see those videos. Then apart from that, you can also have things like we can hang out together if at the highest level of membership. For now, we can hang out physically or online to discuss whatever interests you on my channel. Ultimately, don't forget to comment, like, and share so that more people can have access to the great content I have going on here. Till I come your way again, keep doing maths right. Bye.